Welcome everyone to the San Diego Ramana Maharshi Zoom meeting. This is the first Sunday of every month from San Diego, where we have Michael James joining us live for 2 hours from London. We're always happy to have him here. It's the fastest 2 hours in Zoom, I'd probably guess. And if you're watching us on YouTube, as a lot of people do, because he posts the recordings of these within several days after we do them live on Zoom, and you would like to join us live on the first Sundays or for any Sunday, you're always invited to do so. So what you do is you write to me, I'm Ted, at newsguy55@aol.com, NEWSGUY55@aol.com. Michael, are you ready? We're going to get started with our first question, if you are.
Yep.
And it comes from Louisa. I don't see Louisa here, so we'll have to tell her to watch on YouTube. And she wants to know this. She says, Michael, if the big S self is everything, and I'll bring in one more person here. If the big S self is everything, and the big self is also the little s self, since the little self is part of everything. So wouldn't the big self also experience what the little self experiences? Good question.
Okay. In order to answer this, on the surface of it, this is a very simple question, but actually it is not as simple as it seems, because there's a lot of conceptual confusion in the wording of the sentence. When we talk of the big S self and the little s self, we are talking as if there are two selves, which is obviously not the case. As Bhagavan says very humorously, we can say, in Uladu Napadu, verse 33, the meaning of the verse is, saying I do not know myself or I have known myself is ground for ridicule. That is, according to Bhagavan, it's equally ridiculous to say I do not know myself and to say I have known myself. Why is it ridiculous? He himself asks, Enne, why? To make oneself an object, are there two selves? Because being one is the truth, the experience of everyone. That is, we all experience ourselves as one. And there is no self other than ourself. So to talk of two selves is meaningless. There's no such thing as two selves. But a lot of this confusion arises out of the way texts are translated. And the way texts are translated arises out of confusion in the way the translators understand things. And that is, in Sanskrit, there's a word Atman. Atman is generally taken to be a noun, but it is better to consider it to be a pronoun. In most cases, it is used as a pronoun. Just like the English word self, though it's sometimes used as a noun, it's actually more correct to consider it to be a pronoun, because self doesn't refer to any particular thing. That is why in English, generally, when we use this pronoun self, we add a prefix before it to clarify what is the referent. Myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself. These prefixes we add before it just clarify the reference, but self can refer to anything because everything is itself. And there is no such thing as a self other than the thing whose self it is. Even to say whose self it is introducing confusion. Though that we say in English, myself, it's not that the self is a possession of mine. It is, that is, I and myself are one and the same thing. That is, I, me, and myself are all first-person pronouns. It depends where we use them in the sentence, which form of the first-person pronoun we use. And the same is the case with you, yourself, he, himself, she, herself, it, itself. All these refer to the same thing. It's just for grammatical purposes, we use different forms of the same pronoun. So self is essentially a pronoun. And likewise, Atman in Sanskrit is, in most cases, it is used as a pronoun. However, just like the pronoun tat, which means that, is often conventionally used to refer to Brahman. So if in a philosophical text we come across the word that, or any word derived from that, it may not be clear from the context what that is referring to, but by convention we understand, when that is used without any clear reference, it's referring to Brahman. So for example, in the sentence, that you are, tattvamasi, what does that refer to? It's though that is just a pronoun, it could refer to anything, but it's understood it refers to Brahman. In the same way, just like tat is conventionally understood, though it's a pronoun, it's conventionally understood as referring to Brahman. Obviously, it doesn't refer to Brahman in all cases. It's a simple pronoun, but in certain contexts, we understand tat means Brahman. Likewise, in the same way, the pronoun Atman, which means self, often refers to ourself as we actually are. It doesn't always refer to ourself as we actually are. Often it's used to refer to ego. For example, in the term Atma-samarpanam, self-surrender. What is the self we have to surrender? It is ego. So in Atma-samarpanam, Atman is not referring to what we actually are, it's referring to what we now take ourselves to be. So we have to understand the meaning of terms like Atman or self according to the context in which they're used. And likewise, the term Bhagavan generally uses in Tamil to refer to self is tan, which again is a pronoun. In this verse I just read, when he asks, are there two selves? He says, iru tan. Tan means self, two self. Are there two self? No, there aren't. Obviously, there aren't. So a lot of confusion is created by taking Atman or self to be a noun. This confusion exists not only in Indian philosophy, it also exists in Western philosophy. Western philosophers often talk about the self as if the self is a thing. One very well-known and generally very good philosopher is David Hume. He wrote a lot of very good philosophy. He thought things through very deeply. But there's one famous passage of his, which is complete nonsense. In that passage, he says something to the effect of, when I look within myself, I find no such principle as the self. All I see is perceptions and memories and a constant flow of phenomena, basically. He doesn't say it in quite those words. A constant flow of, I think he may say, impressions or perceptions or whatever. I don't find anything called any such principle as the self. The I that is looking for that self is itself the self he's looking for. So what he's denying, that is, if he had thought through this more deeply, he would have understood that when we talk about self, we're referring to ourself, or to, in certain contexts, self may refer to some other self, but generally when we talk about self, we're referring to ourself. So he's looking for something other than himself to identify as himself. The one who is looking is itself the self he's looking for. So he cannot deny the existence of the self when he is there as the one who's looking for it. So there is a huge amount of confusion around this word self, both in Western philosophy and in Eastern philosophy. This is the reason why when Vedantic texts were first translated into English, generally the term Atman was translated as the self with a capital S. in Indian languages, there are no definite articles. The word "the" doesn't exist in Sanskrit or Tamil, or I think most other Indian languages. Also, the scripts of Indian languages don't have capital and lowercase letters. They only have one. There's no such thing as capitals. So to translate Atman as the self is an interpretation, and particularly if you put a capital S for self. And as soon as we talk about the self, we are reifying the term self. Reifying means we are making self into a thing. All the dispute between Buddhism and other forms of Indian philosophy, many disputes centered around this term Atman, the self. Whether the Buddhists denied there's no such thing as the self, the various schools of Hindu philosophy defended the idea of the self. But there's confusion on both sides, because actually there is no such thing as the self. There's no self other than ourself. That is, the word self only refers to the thing whose self it is. As I say, even to say whose self it is, the thing that it is. That is, when I say myself, I'm referring to, when I say I or myself, the two words refer to exactly the same thing. There's no self. I don't have a self other than myself. That is, we ourselves are the self we are talking about. So self is not a, if we deny the existence of self, as the Buddhists do, in effect, we're denying the existence of everything, because everything is itself. So if you say there's no self, you're saying there's no thing at all. So it's all a huge amount of confusion. So if we want to understand Bhagavan's teachings or Advaita philosophy correctly, we first need to clarify but what the word Atman or self refers to is nothing but ourself. And we are one, so we're not two selves. However, though there are not two selves, why then does does it sometimes appear from the philosophy that we're talking about two separate selves? Well, we are not actually talking about two separate selves. There is only one self. That one self, in its pure form, is what we actually are. But when that same self rises as ego, it identifies itself with adjuncts. There's no ego other than the I that is identified with adjuncts. So this adjunct conflated I is called ego. Adjunct conflated means, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body, in which, as Bhagavan clarified, the term body doesn't refer just to the physical form. It refers to all the five sheaths. That is, to the physical body, the life that animates it, so-called prana, the mind that operates within it. Mind here in this context means the grosser functions of the mind, perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. The intellect or buddhi, the jnanamaya kosha, and the will, the chittam or anandamaya kosha, which is also called the karana sarira, the causal body. The will consists of all the vasanas. So these five sheaths collectively are what we identify with when we rise as ego. So Bhagavan grouped them all together and referred to them all collectively as body. So as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. So it is not that there are two eyes, a big eye and a small eye, or a real eye and an unreal eye. There is only one eye. When that eye remains as it is in its pure condition, it is what we actually are. When it is mixed and conflated with adjuncts, we refer to it as ego. The term Atman, as I say, depending on the context, can refer either to ourself as we actually are or ourself as ego. When Bhagavan wanted to make the distinction, he referred to what we actually are as svarūpa or Atma-svarūpa. Svarūpa literally means own form. It means what we actually are. It's often translated as real nature. So Atma-svarūpa means the real nature of ourself. So whether if he uses, of course, the word svarūpa on its own can refer to the real nature of anything. But when he's using it on its own without a clearly what it's referring to, it's referring to our own real nature. So svarūpa and Atma-svarūpa in most contexts are synonymous. So with that clarification, I think what Louisa is referring to as the big S self is Atma-svarūpa. And what she's referring to as the small s self is ego. These are not two separate selves, just like the snake and the rope are not two different things. That is what it actually is only a rope, but it seems to be a snake. But the snake is actually nothing but a rope. So just like the snake is nothing but a rope, ego is nothing but Atma-svarūpa. However, though there's no difference in substance, that is, they're one and the same thing, the rope and the snake are one and the same thing, the difference is in appearance. Likewise, the difference between ego and what we actually are is not a difference in substance, it's a difference in appearance. That is, when we rise as ego, we seem to be limited within the confines of this body. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body. Whereas when we remain as we actually are, as the pure self, then we, without any adjunct, then we are unlimited, infinite. So what we actually are is infinite Satchidananda. Infinite means we have always been that, we always will be that. Even now we are nothing but that. But we seem to be something other than that. So with that clarification, let's try to unpack this question Louisa has asked. She first says, if the big S self is everything, that means her understanding is that the big S self, that means what we actually are, is everything. This is not quite correct. It is correct to say it's correct to say the snake is a rope, but it is not correct to say the rope is a snake. The rope is what seems to be a snake, but it is not a snake. Likewise, what we actually are is what seems to be everything, but it is not everything. What we actually are is the only thing, not everything. As Bhagavan says in the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yathatamai ulladu Atma-svarūpam andre. What actually exists is only Atma-svarūpa. So we are the only thing that actually exists. So to say we are everything is a misunderstanding. Everything is nothing other than us, but we are not everything. What we actually are is the only thing. So she first starts off with this understanding that self is everything. It is true, everything is self, everything is ourself. Nothing exists independent of ourself. That is, when we rise as ego, we see ourselves as many things. But what we actually are is only one, not many. So what we actually are is never everything. It is the only thing. There's only one, that is, we are one and indivisible. And then she goes on to say, then the big self is also the little self, since the little self is part of everything. When she says the little self is part of everything, and big self is everything, this is another conceptual confusion lies here. But all these things are all part of the big self. They are not part of the big self. They are just an appearance within the big self. That is, what we actually are, the so-called big self, is one without a second, and it is indivisible, it is partless. In verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyar, Bhagavan says, when one knows what the real nature of oneself is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. the implication of that is then what will remain is only ourself, who are Anadi, Ananta, Kanda, Satchitananda. That's the implication. So what do these words mean? Anadi means beginningless. It is beginningless because that is Satchitananda is beginningless because it is beyond time. Time is a phenomenon, but appears only when we rise as ego. So Satchitananda is eternal, not only in the sense that it exists at all times, but that it exists beyond time. It is unlimited. It's not limited by time. Time is just an appearance within Satchitananda. So it's beginningless. It is ananta. Ananta means anta means end. So one meaning of ananta is endless, but it's not just referring to endless in time. Anta also means limit. So ananta means limitless or infinite. So what we actually are is eternal, it is infinite, and it is akhanda. Akhanda means unbroken, undivided, indivisible. Well, it doesn't mean indivisible, but it implies indivisible. So Satchitananda is not something that can be divided up into parts. Firstly, Sat, Chit, Ananda, though there are three, it's a compound of three words. It doesn't mean three words, as some people say, a fusion of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It's not a fusion. That is Sat, is Chit, and Sat is Ananda. These are not three separate things. They're three descriptions of one and the same thing. And that one thing is indivisible. It cannot be divided. So it has no parts. So our real nature is partless. So we can't say ego is a part of our real nature. If we want to understand the relationship between our real nature, ego, the little s self as Louisa refers to it, and everything else, what actually exists is only our real nature, what we actually are. That alone is what actually exists. In the view of what actually exists, there is nothing other than itself. However, we now seem to have risen as ego. And only when we rise as ego do we become aware of the semi-existence of all other things. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Why does he say that? Because everything, all this multiplicity, exists only in the view of ego. So without ego, there is no multiplicity. He makes this clear in verse 4 of Uludunapadu. He explains it very nicely in verse 4. If we pay close attention to what he's saying here, he says, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms? How? That is, when he says if oneself is a form, what we actually are is formless. But when we rise as ego, we identify ourselves with the form of the body. And as Bhagavan clarifies in the next verse, that body is a form consisting of 5 sheaths. So we now, having risen as ego, we take ourselves to be this form of 5 sheaths. And because we take ourselves to be a form, we see a multitude of other forms, but we call the world and God. And then he says, if oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? That is, when we do not limit ourselves as a form, we do not and cannot see any other forms. We can see this from our own experience. We experience ourselves as the form of a body in waking and in dream. And in these two states, we experience a multitude of other forms. In sleep, we do not identify us, we do not experience ourselves as a form. We do not experience ourselves as a body, and consequently, we are not aware of any other forms. So the multiplicity of forms that we now experience appear to us only because we take ourselves to be a form. If we don't take ourselves to be a form, we wouldn't see any other forms. So the multitude of forms comes into existence only because we have risen as ego. That's why in verse 26, he says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Then he goes on to say, ego itself is everything. That is, what we as ego see as all this multiplicity is nothing but ourself. We are seeing ourselves as all this. So, though it is said in the Upanishads, all this is Brahman, Bhagavan goes one step further and says, ego is all this. Why is Bhagavan contradicting the Upanishads? Upanishads say everything is Brahman, and Bhagavan says everything is ego. That superficially, that seems to be a contradiction, but it is not actually a contradiction, because everything is ego. And if ego investigates itself to see what it actually is, it will see that it is nothing but Brahman. Therefore, ultimately, everything is Brahman. But the Bhagavan provides the missing link. That missing link is not made so clear in the Upanishads, but Bhagavan makes it clear. Everything is ego, and ego is Brahman. So the relationship that Louisa is referring to in this question is between the big S self, the small s self, and everything. Everything exists only in the view of ego, which is what she refers to as the little self. And the ego, if ego investigates itself to see what it actually is, it will see that it is nothing but pure awareness, which is what she refers to as the big S self. So it is not that ego and all other things are little parts of both this big whole called the self. It is not like that. What she refers to as the self is Satchidananda, pure being awareness, which is one and indivisible, which is not part, it cannot be divided up into parts. From that, we seem to have risen as ego. And when we rise as ego, we see ourselves as all this multiplicity. Having clarified all that, now I can answer her question. So wouldn't the big self also experience what the little self experiences? The answer to that, contrary to what you may expect, is yes, in a sense. That is, what the big self, what we as we actually are, experience is only ourself as we actually are. What we as ego experience as all this is nothing but ourself. So what our real nature is aware of and what ego is aware of are one and the same thing. However, this is the important point to understand, our real nature sees everything as it is. What everything is nothing but ourself. So our real nature experiences only one. It experiences itself alone. Because it alone exists, in its clear view, there's nothing other than itself. But what it experiences as one is what we as ego experience as many. So though we are experiencing the same thing that our real nature is experiencing it, we are not experiencing it as our real nature is experiencing it. That is, when we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, we will clearly know that we alone exist and nothing else exists or even seems to exist. But when we mistake ourselves to be a body, we seem to be one among many things. And all those many things are actually nothing other than ourselves. But we are seeing ourselves, we as ego are seeing ourselves as all these many things. That is why Bhagavan says ego itself is everything. So how to get rid of this false experience of seeing ourselves, for one, as many? The answer is given by Bhagavan in the final sentence of verse 26 of Uludunaptu. After saying ego itself is everything, he then goes on to say, therefore, investigating what this is giving up everything. Investigating what this is means investigating what ego is. So why is investigating ego giving up everything? As he made clear in the previous verse, verse 25 of Uludunaptu, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to other things, by grasping form, as he puts it there. But the same ego that rises, stands, and flourishes by grasping form, what will happen to it if instead of grasping form, which are all things other than itself, if it tries to grasp itself, what will happen to it? It will subside and dissolve back into its source. As Bhagavan expresses there in a very beautiful way, he says, Hedinal otum pidicum. If seeking, it will take flight. That means its ego seeks its own reality. If it seeks to know, who am I? It itself will disappear, and what will remain is what it actually is. Just like if you look at the snake very carefully, what do you see? Oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. Likewise, if we look at ego very carefully, if we as ego look at ourselves very carefully, we will see, oh, I'm not ego, I am just pure awareness. So by looking at ourselves, we see ourselves as we actually are. And when we see ourselves as we actually are, we no longer experience ourselves as ego. Therefore, since everything else exists only in the view of ego, when ego ceases to exist by our seeing ourselves as we actually are, everything else ceases to exist along with it. So it is, Bhagavan's teachings are so clear and so simple, but though they're very clear and simple, they're very deep and subtle. But so long as we've got many complicated ideas in our mind, it's difficult for us to recognize the clarity and simplicity of Bhagavan's teachings. So in order to understand Bhagavan's teachings clearly, we've got to set aside all our conceptual confusion, put aside all our old preconceived ideas, and see things freshly through the clear through the clarity presented by Bhagavan's teachings. If we understand Bhagavan's teachings clearly, it's very, very clear. We are one. We are always one. But now we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. We have limited ourselves as if we were this body. And because we've limited ourselves, we see ourselves as all these many things. But what actually exists is always only one, and that one is ourself. Atmamasi. So I hope that is an adequate answer to Louisa's question.
I wish you were here to hear it because it was worth $1 million. It was very thorough. My takeaway from all this, and I'm sure if I understand it correctly, which helps me every time I hear it, it's not the first time I've heard what I am about to credit to you that I've heard, something to the effect that the illusory mind, body, self is merely an appearance within the big self. I mean, it's a dream within reality, which is what we're always told we are. And the big self is all that exists. Do I have that right?
Yes, but we can refine it a bit more clearly. That is what she refers to as the little self, in other words, ego, is the dreamer of this dream. And all the phenomena we experience, including our own body and mind, are all objects that appear in this dream, objects experienced by us. That is the term. We need to clarify the term mind, because there's a lot of confusion about the term mind, because often we use the term mind to refer to all thoughts, all mental activities. We refer to them collectively as mind. But we also refer to mind as the knower of all these things. So we need to draw this distinction, that is, the term mind in its broadest sense refers to all thoughts, but all other thoughts exist in the view of the first thought I. So what the mind essentially is the first thought I. This is what Bhagavan teaches us in verse 18 of Upadesha. He says, Enangale manam, thoughts alone are the mind. In other words, mind is often used as a collective term to refer to all thoughts. But then he goes on to say, of all, the thought called I is the root. What he refers to there as the thought called I is ego. It is a thought, but it's a thought unlike all other thoughts, because all other thoughts are jada. They're objects, they're things known by us. They have no awareness of their own. Ego is the only thought that is endowed with awareness, because ego is chit jada granti. It is the knot formed by the entanglement of chit and jada, of awareness and non-awareness, because that is, ego is the false awareness, I am this body. I am refers to the chit portion. This body is jada. So, so Bhagavan says, of all thoughts, the first thought is the thought of a root. The root is the thought called I. Therefore, the mind is I. What he means by saying, therefore, the mind is I, is what the mind essentially is only this first thought I. All other thoughts are constantly changing. The only constant thought in the mind is this first thought I. That is ego. So mind consists of both subject and object, but what mind essentially is only the subject. Is that clear, Ted?
Yeah, it is. And it reminds me of something that's bugged me a lot, but I understand it. You know, we learn at our own pace and we learn differently from one another. I don't think I'm alone in referring to the problem of wording. Which word is the best word to use? It has two heads to it that bug me a lot. One is the use of the wrong word in trying to explain something that I feel is true. And the other head is the use of, or not knowing the right word to use. These things stymie a lot of people, including myself. And you just gave, what, half an hour talk on the importance of getting the wording right before moving forward.
Yes.
And trying to
It's
understand.
not just a matter of using the right word. It's a matter of understanding the words in the correct light. Because even though the correct word is used, if we don't understand that word correctly, like the word self is a very nice word, it's a very useful word, but there's
It's a
so much
perfect word.
confusion about it.
Yeah, it's a perfect word to use as an example.
Yes.
Yeah. And then if we want to substitute the correct word for self, if we're referring to it as about Maya, about the illusory mind-body self, we struggle to know which one is more correct than the other.
Well, Bhagavan uses a very simple, he uses two terms, actually. He uses the term ego, or the term, the thought called I.
Yeah.
He also often uses the term mind in the same sense, but we need to distinguish. When he uses the term mind, we need to always consider whether he's talking about mind as the object or as the subject.
Yeah.
When he uses the mind to refer to the subject, that is ego, or the thought called I. When he refers to mind as an object, then it's all the other thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Let's move on because we've got a lot of questions to get to, and I really appreciate your in-depth analysis of this. Robert Douglas is up next, and he's got a question that says, since true knowledge lies in recognizing the non-dual nature of the Atman and the illusory nature of the jiva's experience of separation and limitation, why then the need for the two words, Atman and jiva, since jiva is an illusion and Atman is Brahman?
Right. Okay. This question also requires clarification of the terms. A lot of what I've said already also applies here. That is, the word Atman in Sanskrit is primarily, it's best to consider it primarily to be a pronoun. It is often used as a pronoun. And if we understand it as primarily a pronoun, then we avoid a lot of confusion. There's sometimes that pronoun is referring to our real nature, but it's the word Atman, it's not necessarily referring to our real nature. So it's better to consider it as a pronoun. Because Atman refers not only to myself, it refers to yourself, himself, herself, itself. It's a generic pronoun. So we need to understand from a context what it's referring to. For example, there's a very simple verse in Upadeshasaram. The meaning is very, very clear, but even great scholars in Sanskrit, people like Dayananda and so many other people who are supposed to know Sanskrit very well, somehow they misinterpret it. I do not know how, because it seems to me it's such a simple verse. Verse 16, what Bhagavan says is, Drisya Varitum, setting aside Drisya, everything seen. Or withdrawing from Drisya. I can't remember the exact meaning of Varitam, but the rest of the main part of the sentence is Chittam Atmanaha Chitva Darshanam Tattva Darshanam. Chittam means mind in this context. Sometimes chittam means the will, but in this context, it's just it's a general term referring to mind. Atmanaha is the genitive case form of Atman. So in this context, Atmanaha means its own, the mind's own, in other words. So Chittam Atmanaha Chitva Darshanam. When the mind seeing its own nature of consciousness is Chitva, there Atmanaha means its own. It's referring to the awareness nature of the mind. That is tattva darshanam. That is seeing the reality. So seeing our own nature of consciousness, our own essential nature, which is consciousness, is itself seeing the reality. That's all that means. But I'm yet to find a translation where someone has actually translated it as it is obviously means. Many people have translated it as the mind. I don't know. There are all sorts of peculiar ways they translate it, but it's so obvious what the meaning is. Chittam Atmanaha Chitva Darshanam. The mind seeing its own chitva is all it means. It's so simple. So because people have this idea, as soon as they see Atman, oh, that must mean big self, big S self, and they get themselves into a confusion. There, Bhagavan is clearly using that Atmanaha as a pronoun. That verse is a translation of the Tamil. In the Tamil, he says, Manam tan oli uruodale, the mind knowing its own form of light. Its form of light means its nature of consciousness, its true nature, which is consciousness. And the word he uses there is tan. Tan it's the inflectional base of the word tan. Tan means self. Tan means is the inflectional base. It's often used as a genitive form. But here, what it's referring to is the mind's own form of light. The mind knowing its own form of light. So tan there means its own, like Atmanaha in Sanskrit. So often we shouldn't think of Atman as a thing. There's no such thing as Atman. Atman is not, in most cases, in many cases, Atman refers to ourself. In other cases, it can refer to other things because it's simply a pronoun. So we need to understand the meaning of the word Atman from the context. Regarding jiva, jiva is a specific word but is referring to, jiva is a noun. It's referring to something very specific. Whereas Atman, the referent of Atman is dependent on the context. The referent of jiva is always referring to ego. That Bhagavan makes it clear. Ego and jiva are synonymous. when it is, Robert says, jiva is an illusion. Yes, in a sense, it is an illusion, but we need to understand when we talk about illusion, what is an illusion? An illusion is a misperception. So there cannot be an illusion without that, an illusion must appear to something. So when we talk about an illusion, we have to ask the question, to whom is this illusion? So when we refer to jiva as an illusion, to whom is this illusion? Jiva is an illusion that exists only in its own view. That is, we as ego see ourselves as something other than what we actually are. We see ourselves as a person, as a body. That is an illusion. But that illusion, there's no other thing that sees that illusion. That is, we as ego see ourselves as something other than what we actually are. All other things are illusory. The other things exist only in the view of ego. And so both subject and object exist only in the view of the subject, namely ego. So though ego is an illusion, it is a very, Bhagavan has taught us, Bhagavan often said, ego is not real. There's no such thing as ego. But all of Bhagavan's teachings are based on ego. For example, in that verse I was talking about earlier, verse 26 of Uludnaplu, he said, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So when Bhagavan says ego doesn't exist, that is true. Ultimately, there's no such thing as ego. But if there's no such thing as ego, there's no such thing as anything else. There's only Atma-svarūpa. So we shouldn't glibly dismiss and say, oh, Bhagavan has said there's no such thing as ego, so we don't have to worry about ego. Bhagavan has taught us that the whole problem, the root of all problems we face is nothing but ego. Though ego doesn't actually exist, it seems to exist. We can't solve the problem of ego simply by glibly saying, oh, Bhagavan has said there's no such thing as ego, so we don't have to bother about it. No, Bhagavan has said there's no such thing as ego, but in order to see that, you as ego need to investigate yourself and see what you actually are. Only when we as ego see what we actually are, will we cease to be ego and remain as we actually are. So to get rid of ego, though ego doesn't actually exist, it seems to exist. So long as you see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, so there's no use in people telling you, oh, no, but the snake is just an illusion. To you, it looks very real. And but however many people tell you it's an illusion, it still seems to you to be very real until you look at it carefully enough. Only when you look at it carefully enough, do you see, oh, it's not a snake, it is just a rope. Likewise, this ego, yes, it is an illusion. It is not real. It doesn't actually exist. But so long as we do not look at ourselves carefully enough, we seem to be ego. So we need to look at ourselves carefully. If we look at ourselves carefully, then we will see that what we actually are is not ego, but just pure awareness. So 2 words referring to what we actually are, for which the best word is not Atman, but Atma-svarūpa. So Bhagavan generally, when he wants to clearly refer to what we actually are, he uses the word svarūpa or Atma-svarūpa. So it's useful to have 2 words, not because there are 2 selves, but because svarūpa is what we actually are. Ego is what we seem to be when we don't look at ourselves carefully enough. So the word jiva or ego, these are useful words so long as we are not looking at ourselves carefully enough. If we look at ourselves carefully enough to see what we actually are, then we will see there's no such thing as jiva or ego or anything. There's only ourselves. But until then, these are very useful words. Robert, is this a clear answer to your question?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael.
Robert's got a
So
second question. Want to go to it, Michael?
yeah, okay. But we need to see beyond the words. We need to see the purpose of the words, the function of the words, what these words are actually referring to, and why words are used, what is the necessity of any words to clarify things. But the real clarity, we can get a certain amount of clarity from the correct words. Bhagavan's teachings do give us a certain amount of clarity, but they give us a clarity at the conceptual level. If we want to understand Bhagavan's, the truth behind Bhagavan's words, as it were, what the real significance of Bhagavan's words, we need to look within. That is, the words are useful insofar as they point our attention back at ourselves. But we can get the real clarity doesn't come from the words. The real clarity comes from looking in the direction in which the words are pointing us, namely back towards ourselves. The more we look within, the more clarity we will get. And the more clarity we get, the more meaningful Bhagavan's words will become to us. If you're shown the map of a country you've never visited, from the symbols on the map, you get a rough idea of where's a city, where's a mountain, where's a forest, and so on and so forth. But you don't really have a clear picture of it until you visit that country. When you visit the country, then the map becomes so much more meaningful to you. So Bhagavan's teachings are like a map. We can understand them to a certain extent just by reading them. But to really understand, to really see what Bhagavan is talking about, we need to look within. To the extent to which we look within, Bhagavan's words will become more and more meaningful to us.
That's about the third or fourth time you've made reference to the importance of words, their essence, not just their understanding.
Yeah.
Reminds me of a longtime teacher of mine who would put it this way: what is it that you would rather prefer, information or transformation? Meaning the answer for transforming oneself is to look within. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suspect you'll be saying that again in this program.
Yeah.
Or other ones. Robert's second question is pithy and goes right to the heart of the matter on a lot of people's minds today, including mine. He says, given the dire state of today's world, what is Bhagavan's gift to it, and how are we to carry out that gift to the world?
When we talk about Bhagavan's gift to the world, we mean Bhagavan's gift to the people of the world, to us. Because the world, Bhagavan didn't have a message for the rocks and the trees. It's for the sentient beings. It's for the jivas that Bhagavan had a message. And Bhagavan's message is that all this, though it seems to us to be very real, it is actually just a dream. So how are we to carry that gift of the world? We are not to carry the gift of the world. We have to carry the gift and go within. That is it. But where Bhagavan's teachings are pointing us, we will continue to see this world and to suffer in this world so long as we are looking outwards. This world seems to exist only because we're looking away from ourselves. If we look at ourselves, we will see that there's no such thing as world at all, because the world exists only in the view of ego. And we seem to be ego only so long as we're looking at the world. If we turn our attention back within to see what we actually are, we will see there's no such thing as ego, and therefore no such thing as the world. Therefore, the ultimate truth that we will know is ajata. As Bhagavan said, ajata is not a teaching. Ajata is the ultimate truth. Ajata is not a teaching because according to ajata, there is no problem whatsoever. So if you go to a doctor with some serious illness and your doctor tells you, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, that's of no use to us. We need to go to a doctor who's ready to recognize that something is wrong with us. So Bhagavan sees what's wrong with us. We are seeing things wrongly. We whose real nature is Satchidananda are seeing ourselves as this small little person in this vast world full of so many problems. That is, embodied existence is a problem. That is, to be embodied means we have been born, we've grown up, we've undergone so many experiences in life, we're susceptible to disease, accidents, death, and so many things. And sooner or later, by one means or other, we're all going to die, whether it's a natural old age death, or dying from a bomb, or dying from a disease, or whatever it is, we're all going to die. This world is an imperfect place. It has always been imperfect. It's never meant to be perfect. You cannot have perfect embodiment. Embodiment itself is an imperfection. So all this world appears to us because we're embodied. And the dire state of today's world is has there ever been a time when there have not been wars in the world, when there have not been injustices, where there have not been famine, starvation, diseases, all these things? This is just the nature of the world. Yes, the world may seem to be a bit more scary place than it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. At that time, it didn't seem so bad. But now things seem, there's wars going on, and there's talk about the danger of a third world war. We've been through one pandemic, and there's danger of more pandemics coming, and we've got global warming coming. There's so many problems there, but the world has always been full of problems. Bhagavan lived through a time when there were two great world wars. Bhagavan was living in Tiruvannamalai from 1896 to 1950. In that time, there was the First World War. Well, at the time Bhagavan came to India, there were wars going on. There was the Boer War in South Africa. So wars are always going on. Then there was the First World War. Then there was a huge pandemic. There was the Spanish flu that killed so many people, so many millions of people. A huge section of the Indian population was wiped out by the Spanish flu. And that was the same all over the world. And then there was the rise of fascism. There was the communist revolution in Russia, and the rise of the Soviet dictatorship under Lenin and then Stalin. And so many people suffered there. And then there's the rise of fascists in Europe, Hitler, and the concentration camps and all these things. And then there's the Second World War. So many, the world, when can we find a time when there haven't been dire problems in the world? It's the nature of the world that what we need to learn from this is the world is imperfect. Embodied existence is imperfect. We may have desire. Many religions say, if you live a good life, you'll go to heaven. But even heaven is an embodied existence, so it will be full of its own problems. So if we want to be free of all problems, we need to give up this false identification, I am this body. That is the root disease, the root cause of all our problems that Bhagavan has identified. So if we take Bhagavan's teaching seriously, we should understand all this world with all its wars and pandemics and diseases and old age and suffering and everything. All this exists only because I've risen as ego and taken this body to be myself. Let me turn within and see what I actually am. If we see what we actually are, we will see that what actually exists is only ourself, and Michael, we are ever perfect.
May I say one thing?
Yes.
I think I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear you say it.
Yes.
This world is convinced that psychology is the answer. If we could just get our psychology right, everything will be fine.
Yes.
It's so, I mean, this is to me the message that Bhagavan has to bring to the world.
Yes.
That is just a fool's game. The embodied life is the problem.
The embodied, that is, psychology is the science of mind. But according to Bhagavan, if we investigate the mind, we'll find there's no such thing as mind at all. So mind is the problem, but the mind in the sense of not all the other thoughts. Most religions and spiritual paths are fixated on the problems of the mind. We have have pure thoughts and pure actions. We have to stop the monkey mind jumping around. Bhagavan said, mind is not the problem. What is the root of the mind? That is I. I is the problem. Not the pure I, but the adjunct conflated I. The false awareness.
Can you see how the world is on its completely wrong tangent? I mean, it's taken psychology as the solution, sociology and psychology as the answer to its problems.
It's always been like that. Religion has been the solution for so many hundreds or thousands of years. But religions, ultimately, all religions, if they're true religions, they'll point our attention back at ourselves. But the vast majority of the followers of religions are not interested in looking within. They want to solve their problems in this life, and they want a better life after it. They want to go to heaven or to have a better rebirth or whatever it is. All is looking outwards. The only solution, as Bhagavan has made clear, and actually as it has been made clear by Vedanta for thousands of years, but we've never been paying attention to it. Bhagavan just makes it particularly clear what is the essential message of Vedanta. We must look within. And all true religions are pointing out this. In the Bible, it's a very, very small part, but there is a portion in the Bible where it is recorded that Christ said, they will tell you, look here, look there, but I tell you, look, see, the kingdom of God is within you. So we shouldn't be looking outwards for solutions. But solutions don't lie outside. Solutions don't lie in churches or temples or mosques or gurudwaras. All these are good things. It's good to channel people's energy to try to be good, to live better lives. But this is not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is to look within, to worship in the temple of our own heart. That is the true church. That is the true mosque. That is the true synagogue, gurudwara, temple, whatever we call it. Our own heart. That is where we can see what alone is actually real.
Yeah.
Where we can see God as he actually is.
Marty?
Yeah, Michael, this might seem like a pretty obvious or an easy question to answer, but I hear the term look within all the time. I see that everywhere. It's in Nanyar, look within, like the diver with the weights carrying in. Within, I guess part of the question is how do you look within without looking for something, if that's what you're to do? And if you're looking for something, now you have the object-subject relationship. If you are just following, like thoughts come up and you see thoughts and where do the thoughts come from and the process in who am I? But could you just basically describe the process of looking within at a deeper level, and how do you actually go deeper in the process of looking within?
Right. Okay. This is a very good question. When we talk about looking within, yes, many people talk about looking within, but people don't all understand. When we talk about within, people within and without are relative terms. So we need to understand from the context what within and without are referring to. Generally, people think if they're meditating, if they've got their eyes closed and they're meditating, they're looking within. But actually what they're looking at is their own thoughts. Thoughts are extraneous to us. When Bhagavan talks about looking within, what he means by looking within is looking at ourselves alone. Everything else is extraneous to us, is external to us. So what Bhagavan means by looking within is looking at ourself. And what is ourself? Ourself is not this body, it is not the mind, It is not the thoughts, it's not the feelings, it's not the vasanas, it's not anything. It is simply I. So looking within means looking at I. Bhagavan used a beautiful word in Tamil, which in Tamil has a nice double meaning. That is, Bhagavan often used this as an alternative to the Sanskrit term antamukam. Antamukam means look, facing within. Anta means within, mukam means face. So facing within is antamukam. But Bhagavan often used the term in Tamil, ahamukam. In Tamil, there's a word aham, which means inside, heart or home. That is, has no relationship with the Sanskrit pronoun aham, which means I, but it happens to be the same word. So when Bhagavan talks about ahamukam, he deliberately uses that word because it has a double meaning. It means looking within and it means looking at I. The implication is, but looking at I alone is looking within. So attending to ourselves, attending to nothing other than our own being, I am, that is what is looking within. Attending to thoughts or meditating on some light in the heart or any other type of thing, it's all external. Attending to anything other than I is extroversion. Attending to I alone is introversion, looking within. Does that help at all, or do you want more of an answer than that?
No, I don't want more of an answer, but what I wanted to relate this to was oftentimes Bhagavan is quoted as saying, when look within, it implies that, asking yourself the question, who am I? And I understand that Bhagavan's always quite clear in everything that he says, and that he uses the term who am I often, and yet he also says holding on to the I oftentimes. And that what you said is, what you just described was that process of holding on to the I. Is investigating who am I any different than holding on to the I?
No. That is, I'm glad you said that, investigating who am I. Bhagavan never said, ask who am I. Though in many English books it's recorded as if he said, ask who am I, that is a misunderstanding. Asking who am I is either a verbal activity or a mental activity. That is not vichara. Bhagavan very, very clearly in the 16th paragraph of Nana, he gives a very clear and unambiguous definition of what he means by Atma-vichara. He says, the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping the attention on oneself. So keeping our attention on ourselves alone is Atma-vichara.
So just the keeping your focus, the internal process on I is the same as Atma-vichara.
That is Atma-vichara. It's not the same as Atma-vichara. That alone is Atma-vichara. And it doesn't mean keeping our attention on the word I, but what the word I refers to.
So in this case, is that ego or is that self?
How many selves do you have?
We've already gone through this today.
There's only one.
It's one, but yeah.
So supposing you're walking in a dark path with Bhagavan, and you see something lying on the path ahead of you, and to you it looks like a snake. So you say, Bhagavan, there's a snake there. Bhagavan can see very clearly it's just a rope. So he reassures you. Now, it's not a snake, it's a rope. But he sees that you're still afraid. So he says, look at it carefully. If you ask him, which it should I look at? Should I look at the snake or at the rope? What's he going to tell you? He'll tell you, look at the snake. Because for you, it seems to be a snake. If you look at the snake, what will you see? Oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope.
Yeah, but you don't want to have all that dialogue going on inside your head while you're
No,
looking
we're not having a dialogue. That's why Bhagavan simply says, attend to yourself, attend to I. Don't worry about whether that I is ego or whether it's small s self or big S self. There's only one self. Attend to that self. Now, when we are looking outwards, we experience that I mixed and conflated with adjuncts, as I am Marty. Marty is the name of a body. So you're experiencing yourself as a body when you're looking outwards. To the extent to which you look within, that false identification will drop off, and you will see I in its purity as it actually is. That's what he means when he says, if ego seeks its own reality, it will take flight. It will take flight means it'll disappear. That is, what seemed to be ego will be seen to be pure awareness.
So as you continue with that process,
That's all.
I do
That's
exactly
all.
what you're talking about. And thoughts continue to rise. And then, after some period of time, it could be a half an hour, it could be an hour, it could be 10 minutes. The effort to continue focusing on I becomes extreme. It just feels like it's all I can do to keep that attention on.
Yeah.
So I take a break and quit for a while.
Though Bhagavan says, Bhagavan defines Atma-vichara as always keeping our mind on ourselves, for most of us, always is not possible. Why? Because we have our Vishaya vasanas are so strong. We have so much inclination to attend to other things. So our aim is gradually to wean our mind off its taste in attending to other things. That's why there's this practice of self-investigation is described beautifully by Krishna in two verses, I think 25 and 26 of chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavan has translated both those verses into Tamil. In the first verse, Krishna begins with the word sane sane. Sane sane means gently, gradually, slowly. This is the only way, because why we are not attending to ourselves all the time, because we have so much liking to attend to other things. So we are slowly trying to wean our mind off its liking to attend to other things. So if we can't attend to ourselves always, as Bhagavan says, what's the next best thing? Attend to ourselves as much as we can. Sometimes we need to take a break. Okay, take a break. After some time, try again. So long as we are trying, that's all that is necessary. But we have to try in a practical way. If we are trying to force ourselves to attend to ourselves when we have no liking to attend to ourselves, it's futile. So if we find that our interest in attending to ourselves is waning, then we take a break, maybe read Bhagavan's books and rekindle our enthusiasm to look at ourselves to see what we actually are.
Can I ask a question about the vasanas you referred to about a minute and a half ago?
Yes.
They're there, we're not aware of them, they distract us, it's hard to look within.
You're not aware of vasanas?
Pardon me?
Did you say we're not aware of them?
Well, we can be aware of them, but we can also be unaware.
We're aware of them every moment. Our mind is being pulled here and there by vasanas.
Yeah. Okay.
Why do we attend to anything other than ourselves? We attend to it under the sway of vasanas. We attend to it because we like to attend to it.
Other than vasanas, there's other subjects that can distract us too. That's the point I want to ask you about.
Nothing other than vasanas distracts you.
Okay. I want to ask
anything you say this distracts, A distracts me, B distracts me, C distracts me. What is distracting you is your vasana, your inclination to attend to A, B, C, and D.
Okay. So let me see if I can get this question answered
Right.
the way a lot of people who bring it to me
Okay.
would like to hear, because
Right.
I'm
Okay.
not sure how to answer it correctly. About 20 minutes ago, you said we will continue to see the suffering in this world as long as we're looking outward.
Yes.
But the question is, when one suffering is a close by, again, I've used this question before, but other people I talk to are looking for more. When the one suffering is a close by family member or a loved one, not people on the other side of the ocean, not people 20 miles away, but somebody next to you. The question is, how do we avoid looking outward when that happens? I can look inward and ask why and go to my inner self, my inner study, examination, investigation, when the problem is intense, but it isn't next door to me. But when it's in my own field of awareness, such as a family member, I can't do that.
Right. Why are you so concerned about your family members? Because of love
Because
and
of
attachment. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's natural. We all have naturally, we are more concerned about those who are near and dear to us than we are about others. This is inevitable. It's part of, when we limit ourselves, then if I am this body, then this person is my mother, my father, my wife, my husband, my daughter, my son, my brother, sister. All these relationships are all pertaining to this person we take ourselves to be. So long as we identify ourselves as I am this person, I am this body, we have all sorts of relationships, and we naturally care for those who are near and dear to us. It's the nature of things. But everything is happening as it is meant to happen. The more we are convinced, but by what Bhagavan has taught us, that what is never going to happen is not going to happen however much we try. What is going to happen is not going to stop however much we try to obstruct it. If we really understand that, we will understand, just like Bhagavan is taking care of us, he's taking care of our loved ones also. So though outwardly, naturally, we show, I mean, our outward self naturally has that care and everything, but we learn inwardly to detach ourselves. Who is it who has so much concern for all your loved ones? It is that person called Ted, whose loved ones they are. Our aim in this path is to separate ourselves from Ted or from whoever it is we take ourselves to be. So we are separating ourselves from the person we take ourselves to be. That is an inward process. It need not affect the care and concern, but outwardly we are showing to others. We can say, in a sense, we are living a double life.
Yeah,
but not
right.
an insincere double life. It's perfectly sincere. But as Ted, you have to be loving and caring to your wife and your children and all those who are near and dear to you. That is the dharma of Ted. But what is your dharma? Your dharma is to look within and separate yourself from Ted. So both can be going on simultaneously.
Yeah.
Let Ted take care of Ted's near and dear ones. You take care of what you actually are.
Yeah. That is a question on a lot of people's minds because they know the value of turning inward. And what you're saying in essence is we can have two opposing thoughts at the same time. We can think about the compassion and that we have for somebody who's suffering, whoever they are, but we can also realize that by turning within, we'll see that none of that exists.
Yeah, that's one way of viewing it, but I'm actually trying to point out something deeper than that is as Ted, it is your nature as Ted to take care of your loved ones.
Yeah.
So let Ted do what is natural to him. But are you Ted? The whole problem lies in this identification of ourselves with this person we seem to be.
Yeah, it's a challenge to shake off.
Yeah. So the problem is not our attachment to our loved ones. The problem is our attachment to the one who we take ourselves to be. because our connection with those loved ones and our connection with your connection with Ted's attachments to his loved ones are only connected to you because you're connected to Ted. So if you can cut that connection with Ted, let Ted continue doing what Ted should be doing.
Yeah.
You be as
Robert,
you actually are.
Robert, your question here, as succinct as it is, has generated a lot of comment. And Raj has had his hand up before, then you pulled it down, Raj, so I thought you took your question away, but you're back. So your turn to ask Michael what's on your mind there about this.
Thank you, Ted. Michael, my question is simple. I know Bhagavan is to give darshan from meditation hall. I wonder, does he had any separate room when he wants to sleep? He go out to sleep, or he use the same meditation hall to sleep? And the second question is, how does his sleep different from normal sleep?
Okay. Bhagavan is not human. He's not like us. So for Bhagavan, there's no such thing as privacy. For 54 years, Bhagavan lived a completely open life. For all those years, he was sitting in what we nowadays refer to as the old hall, or nowadays people have begun to refer to it as the meditation hall, but it used to be referred to as the old hall. He lived in that hall for about 20 years, since the time it was constructed till the last 1 or 2 years of his life, of his bodily life. That was open day and night to anyone who came. The only thing, if there was a rule in ashram, ladies shouldn't remain in the ashram after nightfall. So the ladies would leave, but many devotees just slept in the hall with Bhagavan. They just slept on the floor there. So Bhagavan lived a completely open life. That's as far as Bhagavan's external life is concerned. Regarding Bhagavan's experience of sleep, Bhagavan is eternally in sleep. In fact, Bhagavan is that eternal sleep, but we are all seeking. For us, because we experience ourselves as a body, we experience 3 states: waking, dream, and sleep. And it seems to us, because we take ourselves to be a body, it seems to us that Bhagavan is also a body. So it seems to us that Bhagavan is also undergoing 3 states just like us. But in Bhagavan's view, there is only one state. That is his own state. Yeah, that is what is in Uludunapdana Bandham. Bhagavan says it is only for those who take waking, dream, and sleep to be. Wait a second. I'll get the verse. But this verse 32 of Uludunapdana Bandham. Nanavu kanavu twil twilil naduvaku. For only for those who experience waking, dream, and sleep, apal nanavu twil, the state of waking sleep, which is beyond these, churiam namam enam, that state, the state beyond these, the state of waking sleep, which is beyond these 3, is called the 4th, churiya. At churiyam ade ulladal, since that churiya alone exists, tondrum mundru indral, and since those 3 states that appear do not exist, churiya itself is churiyatita. What is called churiya is also called churiyatita. That's the meaning of that. So in that verse, Bhagavan says it's only for those who experience these other 3 states, waking, dream, and sleep, but we talk about a 4th state beyond that. But Bhagavan's experience is there's no waking, dream, and sleep. There's only that 4th state. That 4th state is the real sleep. That is the sleep called Nanavutuil, Jagrat Shushupti, wakeful sleep, waking sleep. It's waking in the sense that we are ever awake to our own being. It's sleep in the sense that we are aware of nothing else whatsoever. That is the real state. That state we experience every night when we fall asleep. But we experience the sleep we experience every night is actually the same as that chariya. We see it as something different because now, from the perspective of waking or dream, it seems to us that we've come out of that state. So sleep seems to us to be a temporary state. Also, that sleep is actually a state of perfect clarity, but that clarity is hidden from our view as soon as we rise as ego, because when we rise as ego, we identify ourselves with the body. So that false identification, I am this body, is what prevents us being aware of ourselves as we actually are. What we experienced in sleep was what we actually are, but that is hidden from our view as soon as we identify ourselves with a body. So sleep seems to us to be an imperfect state. It's imperfect, firstly, because it seems to be temporary. We go into it and we come out of it. Secondly, it seems to be, from our perspective in waking and dream, from the perspective of ego, it seems to be a state lacking in clarity. But Bhagavan said, actually, that sleep, you never come out of it. It is eternal, and it's a state of perfect clarity. So actually, there's no difference between sleep and chariya. But there seems to be a difference from the perspective of ego in waking and dream. So if you want to know what Bhagavan's experience of sleep was, there's only one way to find out. Find out what you are here and now, and then you will know what Bhagavan's eternal experience of sleep is.
Thank you
Very
so
good.
much.
We got one last question on this topic. Chandrasekharan, did I pronounce your name right?
Chandrasekharan,
Okay,
yes.
very good.
the one who's carrying the moon in his head, Lord Shiva.
That's correct. That's correct.
Know
Yes.
each other, I take it.
Uh, thank you, Michael. I have a quick follow-up to what Marty asked before. After you turn your attention to the self, I guess, obviously self is not an object. So we won't be holding on to it as you would hold on to an object. So what exactly happens then, after you turn your attention in? That's what I'm curious about.
Nothing happens. All happening ceases. That is happening. All happenings appear in whose view? Only in the view of ourself as ego. When we turn our attention back within, we as ego subside. That is, this is just a way of saying it because we can't say it. No words can actually express it adequately. That is, so long as we're looking outwards, we experience ourselves as I am Chandrasekhar and I am Michael, I am whoever, because we identify ourselves as a body. That is so long as we're looking outwards. But to the extent to which we look within, these adjuncts drop off and we remain as we actually are. So actually, attending to ourselves is not a doing. It's a state of being. It's a cessation of all doing.
So essentially, you can only try.
From your
to
name,
turn
I
your-
assume, are you a Tamilian or Malayali?
I'm a Tamilian.
Tamilian, okay.
Yes.
Sumairu. That is the essence. Sumairu, what does Sumairu mean? It means just be. How to just be? Only by turning your attention within. To the extent to which you attend within, you as ego will subside, and what will remain is the state of just being. Sumairupadu.
So I guess then we can only try to turn in, that's it. And then there the effort stops.
Yeah.
And then from there on, there is really nothing. Until you come out and the ego arises due to vasanas, until then you're fine. And then again, it comes back. It's still, so the only thing you're doing is trying to go back. That's it. That's the work that.
But until ego is destroyed, vasanas will remain. So long as we are attending to ourselves, the vasanas will continue rising. The thing is so long as we hold on to ourselves, and don't allow ourselves to be diverted away from ourselves by our vasanas, vasanas will be cutting off the vasanas as and when they come out, as Bhagavan says. So long as they're enemies in the fortress, they'll continue coming out. If we cut them down as and when they come, the fortress will eventually fall in our hands, Bhagavan says in Nana. What he means by cutting them down as and when they come, if we hold on to self-attentiveness, we are thereby not allowing ourselves to be swayed by those vasanas. And so long as we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by those vasanas, they grow weaker and weaker and weaker.
Great answer.
So
Thank you
all
so
we
much.
need to do is to continue trying more and more to attend to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the stronger the Satvasana becomes, and the weaker all the Vishaya Vasanas become. The Vishaya Vasanas become weaker because we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by them, because we're holding on to self-attentiveness. And the Satvasana becomes stronger because we're holding on to self-attentiveness. We hold on to self-attentiveness under the sway of the Satvasana. So the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by that Satvasana, the stronger it becomes. And eventually the Satvasana will become stronger than the Vishaya Vasanas, and we will finally be willing to let go completely. Let go means let go of everything else and subside back into ourselves. We let go of everything else by holding on firmly to ourselves.
Thank you, Michael. And last question. You are the Bhagavad Gita Saram. Do you have the Maharishi Bhagavan's translation and also your interpretation on your website?
I don't have a translation, but if you've got Ramana Nutaratu, I don't know if you can. Yes, this is Ramana Nutaratu. If you get this book, it's in there. There's also Ashram had published a book with a prose meaning by Sadhu Om of that is Bhagavan's verses with the prose meaning, because nowadays many people find it quite difficult to understand verses if they're not studied Tamil deeply. So the Sadhu Om's prose meaning is very helpful.
Michael, we got more questions on this very topic, but I would really like to get that for our final question, and then to get back to these people who are waiting in line. The fourth question on your list today is from Anonymous. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Actually, we did touch upon this question earlier. The question, yeah, you read the question.
It's very brief, very succinct, and quite powerful. Does Ramana ever discuss man's unwillingness to awaken?
All of Bhagavan's teachings are addressing this one problem. Bhagavan may not always be directly discussing that, but he is discussing it all the time. If you want an example of where Bhagavan referred to this directly, once Bhagavan said, everyone who comes here says they've come only for moksha. But if I show even a small sample of moksha, all the crows will fly away and I'll be left sitting here alone. That means we are all coming here saying we want moksha, but we don't really. If we wanted moksha, moksha is ours here and now. Why we haven't attained moksha yet? Because we don't want it. We are unwilling to let go of everything else. If you want to measure how much you really want moksha, try to hold on to self-attentiveness steadily without any interruption. See how long you can hold on to self-attentiveness without attending to anything else. That will measure how much you really want moksha. If we're honest with ourselves, we don't want moksha, because moksha is nothing but that state in which we are nothing and experience nothing other than ourselves. So we can be that and experience that here and now simply by turning our attention within. So okay, I cited one example where Bhagavan directly referred to that, but man's unwillingness to awaken, that is what is otherwise called Vishaya Vasanas. Vishaya Vasanas means our inclination to seek happiness. Well, Vishaya means objects or phenomena. In other words, anything other than ourselves is a Vishaya. And vasana means inclination. So our phenomena inclinations or object inclinations, what that implies is our inclination to see happiness in things other than ourselves. Those are Vishaya vasanas. And that is the whole problem. That is the root problem is ego. Whose vasanas are they? They're ego's vasanas. But as ego, we are constantly being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. Why are we constantly swayed by our Vishaya vasanas? Because we like to be swayed by them. Because what are the Vishaya vasanas? Their own likes and dislikes. So we are swayed by our own likes and dislikes. So the whole of this practice of self-investigation is nothing but a process of weakening our Vishaya vasanas and strengthening the Sat vasana. In other words, weakening our unwillingness to awaken and strengthening our willingness to awaken. The willingness to awaken is what is called Sat vasana or Swatma Bhakti, the love for our own real nature. That is the willingness to awaken. And Bhagavan often said, Bhakti alone is the mother of jnana. So that willingness is so important. Without that willingness, we'll never attain moksha. That willingness, that love to know and to be what we actually are, has to become so powerful that it consumes all our other desires. We need to have all-consuming love just to be as we actually are. So, yes, Bhagavan is constantly referring directly or indirectly to our unwillingness to awaken. And he's also showing us the way to overcome that unwillingness. We can overcome that unwillingness only by patient and persistent practice of self-investigation.
So you're making it sound pretty difficult. I don't know of too many people sitting 18 hours a day looking inward.
You don't have to sit. Sitting is for the body. Let the body sit or stand or anything. It's
right?
nothing to do with the body. You have to look within.
So whether you're standing, walking, working,
whatever's happening, you have to look within. Whatever you may be doing, whatever important work you're engaged in, are you not aware I am?
Mhm.
That you couldn't be doing anything without being aware I am. You couldn't be thinking, you couldn't be working, you couldn't be doing anything. The constant background of all our experience is I am.
And I
But
see
we overlook this. Just like when we go to a cinema to watch a film, we sit there for 3 hours looking at a screen, but we never notice the screen because we haven't gone there to sit and look at a screen. We've gone there to watch some exciting movie. So we're more interested in the fleeting pictures appearing and disappearing on the screen than we are in the background, their ever-existing background. So it's a matter of shifting our attention from all these things that are happening in our life back to the underlying, the background screen, which is our own being, I am. So we have to cultivate more and more liking, more and more taste, just to hold on to that remembrance of our own being. Bhagavan says it beautifully in the 11th paragraph of Nana. He says, Oruvan tan svarūpa madeyam varayal, nirantara svarūpa smaranaye kai patrabanayin adu andre podam. That means until one attains svarūpa, one's own real nature, if one holds fast, kai patru means holding, kai means hand. So Bhagavan's very literally saying holding fast. Obviously, we're not holding fast with our hands. It's just a way of saying it. We hold firmly onto that svarūpa smarana. Svarūpa smarana means remembrance of our real nature. In other words, remembrance of our own being, I am. If we hold on to that, adu andre podam, that alone is sufficient. Oh, and he says nirantara. Nirantara means unceasing svarūpa smarana. So that's all Bhagavan asks us. Do not forget yourself. Hold on to that memory of yourself.
And I think a lot of us find that that's sort of like a positive broken record. The more we do it, the easier it's to do because it's so familiar to us. It keeps repeating in our subconsciousness as well as our consciousness.
Yes, yeah.
Very good.
I don't know about subconscious. I'm
not
not
sure.
conscious of my subconscious. I'm not concerned about that. We have to consciously hold on to that awareness I am.
Yeah, we have we have enough to talk about in the conscious state.
Yeah, yes.
Now,
Okay.
I have a mental block. We got Martha Sriram's husband here, and your name is not on there, so I can't call you by name, even though I know who you are. Take
Sri
away.
Ram, presumably.
Ram.
Sriram.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, it is awesome. What you're describing is so divine and beautiful. Answer a couple of questions. One was, how do you develop the love to that which you don't see and you don't feel because you're so attracted to Vishavasana? And to how do you withdraw from that to your true state? Because love is the mother of jnana. So is that just by practice? Shanai, it'll come to you, and just by listening and meditating, yes. Okay?
Yes, but
Okay.
First thing, there was one fallacy in what you said. You said you don't see or feel it. Yes, we don't see it as an object. We don't feel it as a feeling, but we are ever aware of our own being. So the one thing that is clearer than anything else, Murugan puts it beautifully in the Anupallavi of Atma-vichara. Atma-vichara is the 5 verses that Bhagavan wrote. Murugan wrote the Pallavi, the refrain, and the Anupallavi, the post-refrain, and asked Bhagavan to write the verses for Atma-vichara. What Murugan says in the Anupallavi, the post-refrain, is oneself is so very clear, even to the dullest of people. But in comparison, an amalaka fruit in the hand is unreal. That is, usually if you want to say something is very real and very clear, by comparison, it's as clear as an amalaka in the hand. But this is our own being. I am is infinitely clearer than that amalaka on the palm, even for the dullest of people. So we should never think that we are looking for something. We are not looking for anything. We are looking at what is ever present, namely our own being. And to the extent to which we attend to our being, the real nature of our being will reveal itself to us. Because it is ourself.
Yes. Michael, this answers the other question that somebody else had, that it's not a dual, this is a non-dual practice.
It is.
Because
this is the only non-dual practice. Everyone talks about Advaita. What is the Advaita Abhyasa, the non-dual practice? The only non-dual practice is self-attentiveness, because any other practice, you've got more than one thing. So this alone is Advaita Abhyasa. So
because
Bhagavan has made clear what is the practical implication of all of Advaita philosophy. Attend to yourself. Why do the Vedas say Tattvamasi? Because till now we've been looking for that outside ourselves. So when they say Tattvamasi, what they imply is stop looking outside, look at yourself. You yourself are that. If you want to know that, if you want to know Brahman, all you need to do is know yourself. And to know yourself, you obviously have to look at yourself, attend to yourself.
And you're not looking for something, you're looking just at the state of your being.
Yeah, well, we are looking for something in the sense that now our awareness of our being is clouded. What we actually are is pure I am. But now we experience ourselves as I am Sri Ram, I am Michael. That is clouding our vision. So we are looking for, if we're looking for anything, we're looking for a clarity, but that clarity is our own real nature. So we are ever that clarity. So the way to look for that is to look at ourselves.
Michael, last month, you gave a beautiful example of Dhyana mantra, aham, 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 as an aid. And you said, if you find out where that mantra sounds comes out of, is that like an aid to this getting this clarity state, the Jnana mantra?
our sole aim is to attend to ourself. If repeating the word I helps you to attend to yourself, well and good. But that will drop off after some time. Once you become familiar with attending to yourself, we don't need to repeat the word I. Because
And is it the
what is so
repetition
clear, it's so clear. Once we recognize how clear our own being is, we don't need any words to support us.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. Where is that I word being thrown out of or coming out of?
It's not about the word. It's not about the word. That is, Bhagavan often said, investigating the place from which I rises. But I that rises is ego. That is the adjunct conflated. That is, I conflated with adjunct is ego. From where can that arise? It can arise only from ourselves. It can't arise from something else. Because everything else, as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunaptu, the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. So ego cannot rise from anything other than itself, because those other things come into existence only after ego comes into existence. So ego cannot arise from anything other than ourself. So when he says investigating the place from which I rises, he means investigating ourself. I am. That is, from where can the false awareness, I am this body, arise? Only from the real awareness, I am.
Absolutely. Beautiful. A couple other things, Michael. In the Gita and so on, it's been said that the effect is in the cause. Like the ornaments are in the gold. The parts are in the clay. The waves are in the water.
Yes.
But this world is deemed to be Brahman. But this world, actually, the origin of the world is not Brahman, but the ego.
Yes.
So would you say that in this case, the gold is the ego, the I thought, and the ornaments are the world process, and we have to go beyond the ego.
No, all
we
this
can't just
world,
stop at the goal.
all this world is ego. But what is ego? If you investigate ego, you'll find it's nothing but Brahman. So Brahman, that is, ego is the intermediate substance, we can say. The ultimate substance is Brahman.
And the ultimate substance doesn't do anything.
It's just pure being.
It's a pure being. Never.
Our own
it's
being.
Eternal, is Anadi, Anantam, and Avyayam.
Yes, yes.
And it's the ego that seems to do everything,
yes,
and it doesn't exist.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Bhagavan, he lived with us. What a miracle of miracles God has done. And he transacted to animals and us and monkeys and cow Lakshmi. So what was that like? You explained the way the sleep was. He's in Turiyatita. But we saw him in his transactions with Muruganar and everybody. Who did that? Who transacted?
Sri Ram, we're going to have to wrap it up after this.
Okay, can I answer this?
Yes, go ahead.
Bhagavan is doing everything without doing anything. This is how he himself expressed it. Bhagavan never actually did anything. But by just being as he is, everything is happening as it's meant to happen. There's a beautiful term that Bhagavan uses in the 15th paragraph of Nana, in which he says, all the Panchakritiyas, the creations, Shrishti, Sthiti, Samhara, Tirodhana, and Anugraha, that is creation, sustenance, dissolution, veiling, and grace. All these 5 divine functions, how do they happen? Isan Sanidana Visesha Matratal, by the mere special nature of the presence of God. So God doesn't actually do anything. He says not even a single karma attaches itself to God. So he's never a doer. The nature of God is just being. But by his being as he actually is, everything happens as it's meant to happen. Because the very being of God, the very being of Bhagavan, is infinite love. So that infinite love that is Bhagavan, by that infinite love that is Bhagavan, everything is happening as it's meant to happen. So he is doing everything without doing anything.
good note for us to leave on. I really appreciate it. And I jotted down a couple of thoughts that you said during this last answer to Sri Ram's question. And I want to read it because one of them, they all strike me, but one of them strikes me especially today for some reason. The awareness of our being is clouded. I've always thought of it as being just that, fogged over. We're looking for clarity. It makes perfect sense. The way to look for that is to look at oneself, ourself, as we
Because
turn
you
it.
yourself for that clarity.
Yes, right. So it's right before our eyes,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's clouded over.
Yeah.
Once you become familiar with the process, you no longer need to use a tool such as a word or a mantra. Just sit there in silence and it'll be on as if it's on remote control, taking you to the self. Is that pretty much a correct working formula?
Yes, you can say it like that. I mean, however we say it, it's imperfect. But the thing is, the main point is we need to understand what Bhagavan has asked us to do is to keep our mind fixed on ourselves. In other words, attend to ourselves as much as we can.
Michael, we appreciate you being here every month for a long time. Do you have any final word to leave us on today? I mean, you must have 1,000 ideas that are useful to each and every one of us. But right now, at this hour, on this day, what might be your final word?
What Bhagavan, there are many very useful ideas in Bhagavan's teachings, but what ultimately they're all pointing at is pointing our attention back to ourselves. So if we really want to pay attention to what Bhagavan is teaching us, we can, the real sign that we're paying attention to what Bhagavan is teaching us is attending to that which he's asking us to attend to, in other words, ourselves. So turning our attention back within, that is all that is required. If we can hold on to that nirantara svarūpa smarana, that uninterrupted svarūpa smarana, that alone is sufficient, he says. We can, most of us will feel, no, I can't hold on to it uninterruptedly. Doesn't matter, hold on to it as much as you can. That's all we can do. Bhagavan will take care of everything else. Bhagavan is already taking care of everything else. We cooperate with him by trying to do what he's asked us to do, which is to hold on to self-attentiveness. Not forget our own being.
Do that all day. Any of us can do that all day long.
If we have sufficient love.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's our unwillingness is the problem. But the only way to overcome this unwillingness is to keep on trying.